on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. You know who it is by now,
Jimothy.
So ladies and gents, we are back in the hot seat with yet another discussion. Now in the background you're going to see some random gameplay of a few decks that I've just been testing, to say the least, so don't pay too much attention to that. What we want to pay attention to is the topic of discussion for today. Now I haven't actually been, well, I have been playing Yu-Gi-Oh, but I haven't actually been making a lot of videos, mainly because I've been picking up some extra work, which is obviously necessary because money equals money. And it actually facilitates my lifestyle. But I've been picking up an extra bit of work, but that doesn't mean I haven't been not in tune with what's happening in the game. And what I want to talk about today is going first in Yu-Gi-Oh. Is it a problem? Now the short answer in my opinion is yes. There's a whole host of issues with going first in Yu-Gi-Oh, especially as we've seen the last WCQ, EU WCQ and NA WCQ. There's no real disadvantage of going first in Yu-Gi-Oh. I don't know probably why you would choose to go second. Maybe because you start with 6 cards, but some of the combos that can resolve going first can actually just almost land you neutral in card advantage, especially setting up negates on the board. You can out resource your opponent. You could potentially even get knowledge of what they're playing depending on what type of deck you're playing. Like there's no reason to really go second unless you're playing a deck like Tenpai, and Tenpai is a little bit of its own beast, and I've heard a few people complaining about the Tenpai field spell, rightly so, because Tenpai field spell is a little bit ignorant. But I do think without a card like that, like how are they really gonna go second? There's no way that they can outplay their opponent with the way that the deck plays, especially with the boards that are being putting up now. Snake Eye Fiendsmith just puts up a super duper FTK board with like a gazillion follow-up, which is literally like just dying on your first turn. It's almost like gimmick puppets with the illusion that you can play. Now obviously there are a few cards that you can play going second, like your Dark Ruler No Mores, but ultimately you're gonna get out resourced. So let's get into this discussion, ladies and gents. Now, what is the problem that these going first decks create? It's a little bit open to opinion, but I do believe that it can stifle deck building. Now what do I mean by that? At the moment there's a little bit of the prevention is better than cure notion that's going around. So rather than letting somebody build up an end board and trying to crack the board with like board breakers or using an engine to crack a board, people are just playing a billion hand traps just to be able to stop your opponent from playing. Now this creates a bit of a problem in terms of the spectacle of Yu-Gi-Oh. It's not really a good watch from time to time. It's only a good watch when the hand traps are at the game and people are interacting using their engines. But what tends to happen is people are just throwing hand traps at each other just because it's the best way to kind of like prevent your opponent from building up that unbreakable board and giving you an opportunity to play. And unfortunately it also means that deck building's a little bit narrow, as well as the range of decks that you might see in the meta, because typically if you're going to be throwing hand traps at your opponent, you need to resolve what we in the community call a 1-card combo, and the best decks all enable 1-card combo, so to speak, or just 1 card that nets you a whole load of resources, whereas some of the rogue decks are obviously just not capable of doing that, which is a little bit of a shame, and it kind of pushes the casual player base out of the conversation basically when it comes to like viable decks, which I think is another problem, which I'll talk about in a moment. But it creates this weird deck building scenario where 15 to 18 slots in your deck are just designated to hand traps to stop your opponent from building up their kind of board, and then you've just got to like try and resolve your combo, which is a little bit of a shame because it kind of like takes away from unique aspects of deck building, being able to kind of like resolve this like weird combo to address a specific deck in the meta. Just not necessarily the thing anymore. People are just stopping you from playing and then full comboing and then saying, can you do that? Can you crack my board? And if you do crack my board, have you got enough gas in your engine to be able to kind of like stop the follow-up? Because most decks nowadays, especially the meta decks, have just got like unlimited follow-up. So in that respect, it doesn't make for good deck building. And as a spectacle, ladies and gents, like it's not fun to watch. watching people throw hand traps at each other until somebody can resolve a 1-card combo is just not, it's not interesting at all. I don't care what anybody says. Everybody knows that the most interesting games are games where there's a lot of back and forth between interactions between one engine and another engine, or even just the same engine. Like TM mirror matches, although they were difficult to follow for your average Yu-Gi-Oh player, they were very, very skillful, and it was interesting to see like Chain Link 9 and 10, and then all of that being resolved, and the little intricacies with regards to like the interactions was quite interesting to watch. But seeing people just throw Ash, Droll, Vela, Infinite Impermanence, Nibiru at your opponent, and then just your opponent just stopping because they can't do anything more, and then you just normal summoning Snake Eye Ash, it's just not a spectacle basically. So what is gonna happen if this whole notion of going first is not addressed? Now there's two things. A lot of people are saying, oh well, make going second better, but I don't think that's the problem. There's so many going second cards in the game. Like Raigeki's at 3. Like I don't know where I've seen it. I think there was a video that I watched the other day where it says, I don't understand why Raigeki's not being used when it's kind of busted. And I do agree. And it's just it's a shame because we're getting, because of the power of going first, we're getting very, very homogeneous end boards, which I spoke about in a previous video, where you're just ending on the same type of negates, the Appaloozas, the IP Mascarenas, the very, very generic end board boss pieces, which basically just stop your opponent from doing an action like negating or like floodgating your opponent out of certain things. And because of that, what we're going to start to see is the casual player base to kind of like break away. I mean, I was at locals the other day, and one of the guys that goes to locals is a bit of a casual player, likes to play his like runic variants and just mad crazy, just off the wall picks. Just said, I don't really want to come locals anymore because I'm just tired of going against Fiendsmith Snake Eye, and it hasn't even been out for that long. And he was just frustrated with the meta, not because he was looking to win anything at locals, but he just felt like he just couldn't play. And that's a bit of a problem because, believe it or not, like the casual players are the ones that are buying packs at your locals. They're the ones that are buying food and drink and keeping the local scene alive. And if we start losing those players, we're just going to be playing against each other or the quote-unquote pros, so to speak. And it just means that the part of the community that's lost, and ultimately it's just refining the meta and just kind of like slimming down the player base. Now in contrast to that, like high level events are seeing like record numbers, but those numbers will begin to dwindle unless we start getting more players into the game. And I don't feel like having 18 hand traps and telling your opponent you can't play Yu-Gi-Oh is the way to introduce them to the game and get them back into playing Yu-Gi-Oh, which ultimately is what everybody wants, to be honest. But yeah, it means less diversity as well, because obviously people are going to gravitate towards the strongest deck, and the strongest deck being, like, at the moment, Snake Eye Fiendsmith, which will change in the future, hopefully, with a ban list. It just means that a lot of players will play that, because why would you play anything else? Why are you going to play a weaker deck knowing that you're just going to get hand trapped to death and just lose, or you're just going to get full comboed on and lose? So yeah, there are a few issues if going first isn't addressed, basically. Okay, the fix. What can we do to address going first in Yu-Gi-Oh? And I believe it's quite simple, to be honest. Konami can still print powerful cards with unique interactions, but I feel like what they need to do is place a few more restrictions. It's no coincidence that a lot of the most like broken or the most heavily played, meta changing or meta effective cards are the ones with the least amount of restrictions that can do multiple things. And I don't know who I was having a conversation with. I think it might have been somebody at locals. I was comparing Snake Eye Ash to like Vanquish Soul. So Vanquish Soul has Raisin, which searches a monster, as well as Stake Your Soul, which special summons a monster from deck. Those are two cards. Whereas the Snake Eye deck has Snake Eye Ash, which searches you a monster, but also special summons a monster from deck. Like, I understand that decks can't be made equal, but that right there is just another level of power creep. The fact that that card has that many like broken effects that you would typically see on two different cards is crazy. And on top of that, it's a body on field as well. So like, there's a whole host of things that you can do with that without having any kind of restrictions. You're not locked into like fire, you're not locked into snake eye, it's not an in archetype thing. You can just special summon another monster from your deck, which I just think is just absolutely busted, as well as searching a monster, and that's all on one card. So yeah, I feel like there needs to be more unique restrictions to kind of like allow people to play powerful decks, but at least get them to be tied into that archetype, or just from that point forward be locked into like, I don't know, fire monsters or locked into pyro monsters, just something to kind of like limit it from just being able to just go wherever it wants. Because now we've had the introduction of the Fiendsmith engine, again another generic engine that has little to no restrictions, that is just fairly generic, well, very generic basically, and it just means that it can just facilitate a whole lot. So I think that's my approach to it. There are a few other ideas out there. I know I've heard a few people saying about like going second, being able to draw the 6 card and not have a draw phase, just so you can see exactly what you're working with. I don't know about that, but I think going first is more of a problem. Just being able to like set up your field, allow your opponent to just waste resources, and then still be able to end on somewhat of a field, as well as your own hand traps, and I just feel like that's just way too strong. So ladies and gents, in closing, going first in Yu-Gi-Oh right now currently is busted. Like, it needs to be addressed, and I'm interested to hear what you guys would do to kind of like balance out the fact of like going first as opposed to going second. Like I said earlier, like Tenpai is its own beast because it has to play an ignorant field spell, because otherwise how is it going to go second? It can't break a board with just its engine alone. There's just not enough interaction there to be able to plow through multiple negates as well as hand traps as well. So it's a bit of a conundrum. Like, Konami have like kind of put themselves in a corner, and the only way that they're going to do this, apart from like making more generic restrictions, is a bit of a hard reset where they just lower the power level of the game again to be able to kind of like print more cards and entice people into picking up certain other decks. Like, I'm currently in the process of collecting Whitewoods, but like the deck is so far like in comparison to like Snake Eye Fiendsmith, like you just won't see it represented, because like why are people gonna like try and tech into playing that strategy if they know that they're coming up against like Snake Eye or even Yugioh Fiendsmith for that matter? It's a difficult one, but it definitely needs to be addressed. But what do you think, ladies and gents? That's enough of me waffling on. Let me know in that comment section below. How would you change it? What changes would you make? Is going first fine in Yu-Gi-Oh? Is going second the problem? Let me know in that comment section below. And we find ourselves at the end of another video. As always, if you did enjoy this content, you know what to do by now. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of that beautiful good stuff, and I will definitely see you guys on the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.